Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and they should show up here in my chat room. I had the interesting experience today of when oh, and hello to Bimby in the chat room. It's good to see you, Bimby. When I signed into Restream, I found they have changed it yet again. And luckily, the change is not so extreme that it took too long to figure out, but it's different than what it had been 24 hours ago. And I always worry about that because it seems like whenever these services try to improve things, they often have the opposite effect. I certainly found that true the last time they changed anything. We'll see what happens this time. It would have been nice to have been aware this was coming, but that's beside the point. But that speaks to my subject for today, and my title for today is Thoughts About the Future, but my actual subject is what do we do when things don't go the way we want them to go? And hello to Nikki Dodd. It's good to see you, Nikki. You'll notice, for example, I'm not using my green screen today. And that's because since I've changed my location, I also have to fix the lighting before it will function properly. And so I'm using a curtain. And Bimby says, welcome to forced beta testing. Yeah, it may also be welcome to a new platform, but we'll see how that goes. It is there are many circumstances in which what we hope for or what we expect is not what we get. And my original subject for today, I was going to have Ed the Pagan as my guest, and we were going to talk about quote political realities end quote and strategies from the Witch Wars Defense Manual and how they apply to daily life. And we will reschedule that, but at the last minute something came up. And I have a couple of clients that I'm working with who are expecting some very important things to happen. And the question is, well, what if they don't? And it occurs to me that this is something um, very commonly at work in our lives. I mean, it's very common that what we expect is not quite what we get. What we hope for is not quite what we get. And hello to Timothy in the chat room who says, I guess there's a solar flare alert. I'm not surprised. We've been having that. And I thought I would talk a little bit about my attitude of what you do when what comes to pass is not what you were expecting. And my answer to that, now Timothy says, pray, you really need to. Well, that is sometimes one of the things that I might do. I don't end this show with a prayer every day because I don't believe in the concept. Obviously, I do. I believe in magic also. But my first response to this is you don't give up. You keep doing the next right thing. You do whatever will have the most practical effect in your moment. Um, my expected guest was not able to come. I chose another subject. And hello to Arlene Bear in the chat room. It's good to see you, Arlene. The green screen is being a bit problematic. What's happening is the shadow that you see behind me because of the current lighting is disrupting the green screen. What I'm going to do to that is change my lighting, but in the time being, I found a new background. If a situation did not come about the way that I wanted it to, I would look for the next thing that I can do to achieve my goal, not let it overpower me. And I see a lot of people who allow themselves to be overpowered when their expectation is not their result. And, I was thinking, in fact, I brought it up in a conversation yesterday. One of the reasons I'm here talking to you now, one of the reasons that 45 years later, I'm still one of the first priesthood of the Corellian tradition, and this still means something. So I never gave up. I always tried to stay focused on my goals, even when they didn't appear to be successful in the moment. When things were not going the way that I would prefer for them to go, I would find other ways for them to go. And in my experience, there's always something you can do. Now, I see a lot of people. After this recent election, I saw a lot of people from a different point of view after the last election, feeling very overwhelmed by everything. And I've talked at great length about Project 2025, which is in its way overwhelming, but you can't be overwhelmed. You have to be practical. You have to think, well, all right, this is our situation. What do we do? And it is something we'll probably be talking about for quite a while. For me, one of the biggest questions is, will Project 2025 go forward as quickly as it claims that it plans to? And I don't know if that's going to be entirely possible. I'm sure that it's basically a wish list, and that not everything on it will necessarily fly. But I suspect that the majority will. What does that mean? Well, it means we have to have some practical activities to counteract any negative effects that it has on our communities. Um, Signing online petitions is not one of those. Online petitions are almost never a practical reaction to any situation. There are a few exceptions, but not very many. Um, Directly contacting legislators to indicate how you feel about situations, that's a more practical thing to do. And hello to Steve in the chat room. Um, Virtue signaling is not a particularly practical reaction. I've seen a number of postings back and forth in the last few days about the idea of wearing blue bracelets to show that you're a safe person. And I have to say, to some extent, if you have to wear a bracelet to show that you're a safe person, you might not be that safe, because ideally you should have lived in such a way that it's obvious. But the other thing is that people are both in favor and opposed to this, and it really is at best a band-aid to situations. It is far better to go out and do things that help people to feel safe, help people to be safe, as we can see what they are. At this moment, we cannot really see, um, for those communities who feel they are endangered, exactly what needs to be done, because nothing has actually changed yet. Um, and nothing's going to be done overnight. And hello to Antonio in the chat room. It's good to see you, Antonio. Everything that those people who feel endangered, and I would argue that our pagan community probably should, certainly the LGBTQ community certainly should, a number of ethnic communities certainly should, but there's nothing to do with that at this exact moment except prepare for eventualities. Um, because there is no successful immediate strategy, uh, other than making Um, I seem well. Timothy's correct about technological issues because I apparently just lost connection for a moment. But what I was saying, some of the things we can do right now include making sure that our ability to communicate cannot be easily interrupted, making sure that we have ways to stay in touch. If some of our central groups were to suddenly, some of our central online groups, for example, suddenly were not there. One of the things that we all should be aware of who rely on social media is that that could be gone overnight. Any given group, if it's the only one you're using, can simply be erased. And so you want to make sure that your communication formats will survive that, that you can actually pick up a phone and call people, that you know how to meet people locally. That is one of the more practical things we can do right now. Make sure that our support communities have strong communication, regardless of what might happen in the outer world. Other things we can do is what we've been told again and again through astrology and oracles, and that is see to the strength of our base. And that includes making sure of the strength of our resources and also, again, our communications, our associations. Um, Many oracles have been talking about this for the last several years. Um, I'm particularly put in mind, well, the Corellian ancestors in their oracles have spoken of this. The goddess Demeter in the Aquarian oracles repeatedly spoke about make sure your local base is strong. And at this point, we all need to be looking at that. Um, there are many things that we can do in the short term, but none of them is particularly extravagant. Um, and Arlene says, Goddess forbid, do you have backups of all your videos in case that happens? Well, yes, actually, we, for the most part, do. But we need to make sure that we continue that. We could very easily lose this vast archive of historical footage. If, for example, YouTube were to go down or our channel were to be removed, um, so much of the work we've done would then become reliant on what we have in our personal archives. But we have had some care to maintain our personal archives, and I recommend everybody does. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Could it happen? Absolutely. Um, and could it happen in a way that does not obviously reflect prejudice? Yes, there are a variety of ways that could be done, which would make it very difficult to say, well, you did that because. Timothy says libraries and galleries are important. Yes, they are. Um, it is very important to, for years I've said that if we want to control how we are looked at, then we must control our image. If we want to maintain our history, we must maintain it. We cannot assume that it's just going to survive. It certainly has not, at least within our community in the past. One of the things that we have had a huge issue with in the pagan community is generational disconnect. And it seems like one generation after another does not recall the history that came before it. Everyone seems to want to think this all started 5 years ago or 50 years ago, and it did not. But of course, some of the reasons that certain groups like to portray that image is it makes them more powerful if they happen to form at that moment. So how we deal with the future, right now, the best thing we can do are simple, practical actions. Project 2025 certainly has no soft spot for the pagan community. It also doesn't particularly target us because I don't think they take us very seriously, nor can one blame them. We have not behaved in a very serious manner. But we are also talking about groups like the LGBTQ community, who also need to be paying attention to their history and making sure they don't have everything just online. Um, we all need to be paying attention to our legal standing. And hello to CDC, um, who says, I think being public pagans, if you're able, is important too. And yes, I totally agree. I have been a public pagan since I was 13 years old. Um, I first started publicly talking about it when I was in 7th grade. Um, and I've done relatively well that way. But I think it's more important than ever because when people know you, and assuming they like you, they're much less likely to move against you. Allowing ourselves to be isolated would be the worst thing we could do. Um, we have the benefit that we are not a a homogenous group that would be easy to isolate. And but I think that there probably will be at least an attempt from certain quarters to limit our ability to communicate to that wider society. And we'd best be prepared for it. If we're not, we're being foolish. And we need to be aware of the fact that we may not win that confrontation. And then what do we do? Well, obviously, we must have other ways of communicating, and we should be developing that now. We should not wait till the last minute. And if we do win that confrontation, so much the better. Um, but we must be prepared for looking at every way to continue going forward. So what do we do when things don't go the way that we want them to go? Well, we sit back and we consider the best ways to ameliorate that situation. We certainly don't give up. We are very foolish if we let it overpower us. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons I am still here is that even during those times when things went badly, and there have been times when everyone has loved me and times when everyone seemed to be attacking me, and I never stopped in either case. And that is my advice to the pagan community. Do not be overwhelmed. Do not stop, and um, do not give in to fear. Remember, you are magical people. Spirit has not brought us so far for no reason. So we need to be mindful of that. Now, CDC says, I have found that working in public ministry as a pagan is important for visibility. I might be the only out pagan people may ever know, or at least that they think they know. And yes, this is absolutely true. And when we do that, we need to bear in mind that we're being ambassadors. It's not just a matter of um, I am who I am, but in many ways, we are representing our community, and we need to be mindful of that. And one thing that I think we can say with absolute certainty is we're not going to disappear. One of the things I can say is that I have lived long enough in every marginalized community that I'm a member of to remember when they were seriously marginalized, and what that was like. What it was like when being an LGBTQ person meant being in the closet. I remember those days. And I remember pretty much the whole history of, of the LGBTQ movement's liberation and coming forward. I remember what it was like when it was really not terribly safe to be publicly pagan. And I can remember when everything was a secret and we don't talk about this outside of the family and blah, blah. Um, it's not a life I would care to return to, but there were ways of doing it. Um, and I think what I would say to that is, no, we don't want to go back to that. But it is always worth remembering that we did survive anyway, and we will one way or another. And that's true. That's true for all of the marginalized communities. The question is, how bitter is survival? And there are times when there can be a lot of negative impact in the art of survival, a lot of pain with that. And, I can only say one has to keep one's eye on the future. Where we are right now, as marginalized communities, we must have our eye on the future and on not allowing the present to overwhelm us. Make no mistake, the Project 2025 people have no place for us in their world. Um, and we must be mindful of that. And not allow ourselves to be deceived into not taking the necessary actions to ensure our survival. It would be very easy for us to say, oh, we're overreacting. Oh, that could never happen. But we know perfectly well it can, because it has. Anyone my age will remember, granted, the waning days of far more severe um, marginalization. And CDC says, Reverend Don, have you ever shared your journey as a young pagan in school? I probably have in some of these shows, and I don't have enough time to talk in great length, but I never had a problem. And looking back, that kind of surprises me, considering when we're talking about. Um, and I can remember being here in Danville High School, and I was one of two public witches in Danville High School in the 1970s. One pagan, which was me, and one satanic witch who I never met. Um, but I oddly enough never had any kind of problem with it. I don't know if it's the way that I presented it. I don't know if it's the fact that even as a teenager, I was a rather tall, imposing person, and if people had a problem, they maybe didn't care to say it. Um, and I have to tell you that that's also one of the more important aspects of survival, of being sufficiently imposing that people want to think twice before they try to move against you. And that is not something our community has been good at. But it is something that we should be mindful of in the future. So in a way, I have talked about some of the things that we probably would have been talking about if we had had the pagan today, but we were particularly going to talk about things that are in the book, the Witch Wars Defense Manual. And one of the things about the book is that the definition of witch wars that it's using refers to the kind of thing you see in the pagan community, but also points out all political conflicts are basically witch wars. And the same strategies are pretty common no matter where you look. And so what is effective if you're dealing with some ridiculous local witch war, and they're all ridiculous in my opinion, is going to be the same if you're dealing with some political issue or social issue. You can look for the same strategies on all sides and apply the same strategies to survive and prosper. And so I guess I am recommending the book to you. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it at CorellianPublishing.com, The Witch Wars Defense Manual, Volume 2, How to Win, and also Volume 1, which is available for as a free download at Corellian Publishing. Now, with that, I want to take a moment to hear from our sponsors. And here we go.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
And thank you to thank you to our sponsors and Equinox Learning Hub and Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions. And our next auction will be this coming Saturday at 4 p.m. And we want to thank everyone who supports our auctions, which are basically part of our elder care ministry. And mentioning the elder care ministry, the other thing I want to say is that, it may be that political situations may yet distract us from our normal activities, but we're not at that point right now. We need to continue doing the practical things that we needed to do in the first place. We definitely don't need to be running around like chickens who've lost our heads, and we don't need to be borrowing trouble from the future. We need to be preparing for possible issues, but not giving up fights that haven't even begun. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people who seem to be doing that, and my advice is don't. Stay strong, hold your line, and move forward. And never give up, because as long as you're continuing to move forward, there is always the hope of having the best possible outcome. So, with that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour, and let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to continue to survive and thrive and progress. Help us to make the wise decisions that will allow us to do so, and to avoid the problems that life always does offer us. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us, still from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always. As well, I thank you for joining me, and I will see you again tomorrow when my guest will be Chris Copeland, and we'll